First story, I was young and stupid and ended up cheating with my brothers. Then girlfriend, my brother physically assaulted me and abandoned the whole family, including our parents. It's been 10 years and I have tried to reconcile, but he is still stuck in the past and refuses to even talk to me. I've never admitted this out loud. Never told a soul, but I think it's eating me alive. It's been 10 years and I still wake up some nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how different life would be if I had just walked away that night. I was 19 and Ron was 21, my older brother, my best friend. The person I looked up to my whole life. He had always been there for me, covered for me when I screwed up as a kid, defended me in fights and made sure I had everything I needed. He was a good person, one of those rare people who actually lived by the things they believed in. Loyal, honest, selfless. And I threw all of it away. Ron had been with Krista since high school, 4 years together, and he was already talking about proposing he loved her in a way that made it seem like nothing could ever shake them. I thought she loved him the same way, but maybe things were already cracked before that night. Maybe I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe I was just weak enough to let it happen. Ron had a work emergency and asked me to drive Krista home from a party. She was drunk more than I'd ever seen her before. She kept talking about how Ron was too good, how she didn't deserve him, and how sometimes she wondered what her life would have been like if she had made different choices, like choosing me. I should have ignored it. I should have told her to sleep it off. But I didn't. We got to her apartment, and I helped her inside. I was about to leave, but she pulled me in, not just physically, but in a way that made it hard to walk away. She said things that made me feel like I wasn't just Ron's younger brother. It started with a kiss, and I should have stopped there. I had every opportunity to leave, to say no, to remind her that she was drunk, that she didn't mean it. But I didn't. I let it happen. All of it. And the worst part, for those brief moments, I let myself enjoy it afterward. We lay there in silence, both of us realizing too late that we had just set off something we couldn't take back. Krista started crying. I felt sick. Neither of us said a word. I just got up, got dressed, and left. I didn't sleep that night or the next. I told myself it was a mistake, that it was one awful drunken decision that we'd both bury and pretend never happened. But the guilt settled in fast. I had betrayed the one person in the world who never would have betrayed me. And then a week later, Ron found out he didn't show up angry. That's what made it worse. If he had come in yelling and throwing punches, I could have at least understood how to react. But he just stood in my doorway looking at me like he was waiting for me to admit it, and I couldn't. I didn't say a word, because there was nothing I could say that would make it better. He coldly said, "She told me it felt like something." Beyond anger, I had never seen my brother cry before, not when he broke his arm. Not when our grandfather died. But he cried then, and all I could do was stand there useless while I watched the only real bond I had in my life fall apart. He said again, "She told me everything," and I realized he wasn't waiting for me to explain. He was waiting to see if I would lie. I didn't. I just nodded, because what the hell else could I do? That's when he hit me. I don't even remember how many times. He only stopped when he realized I wasn't going to fight back. He stared at me for a long time after that, like he was trying to find some part of me that still looked like the brother he grew up with, but whatever he was looking for, he didn't find it. Then he walked away and he never came back. Ron cut me off completely. It wasn't just me either. He left everyone, quit his job, moved out of town, stopped answering calls. My parents were devastated. They didn't even know the full story at first, just that Ron had disappeared, that he wouldn't talk to them. It took months before my mom finally broke down and demanded to know what had happened. I told them. I don't know if I expected them to scream at me or kick me out. Maybe I even wanted them to, but they didn't. They never hated me, not in the way Ron did, but things were different after that. They still talked to me, still included me in family gatherings, but there was always something missing, like some part of them had shut off the same way Ron had. And Krista, she disappeared too. She moved away, cut ties with everyone, and never tried to reach out. I don't know where she is, what happened to her, or if she even thinks about that night the way I do. Maybe she regrets it. Maybe she's managed to forget. I never did. I wish I could say I fixed things, that after years of trying, I finally got through to Ron, that we made amends, that I earned his forgiveness, but the truth is I never did. 10 years, a whole effing decade, and he still won't speak to me. I tried everything. I tracked him down and found out he was living in some small town halfway across the country. I once even drove all the way to where he was living. Sat outside his apartment for 2 hours, trying to work up the courage to knock. But in the end, I didn't. Because deep down, I knew he didn't want to see me, and I can't blame him. I ruined his life. I took something from him that he'll never get back. I don't know if he's happy now. I hope he is. I hope he found someone else. Someone who loves him the way he deserves. I hope he built a life without the weight of my betrayal on his shoulders, and me, I live with it every single day, because some mistakes can't be fixed. Some betrayals don't get forgiven. And I have to live with the fact that I lost my brother forever. Update. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to post an update, but after reading through the comments, especially from those who gave me real advice, rather than just telling me I was a terrible person, I felt like I owed it to you all. A lot of people told me to try again, so I tried one last time. I got in my car and drove. No plan, no rehearsed speech, just a stubborn hope that maybe after all this time he'd at least be willing to hear me out. I parked outside his shop and sat there for a while, trying to convince myself that this wasn't a mistake. It felt surreal knowing that after a decade of silence I was about to see my brother again. Eventually I forced myself to get out and walk inside. I spotted him immediately. He was behind the counter, focused on paperwork. The moment he saw me, his whole expression changed. He didn't give me a chance to speak before turning away and walking straight out the door. I followed him outside, my heart pounding. He stood there waiting for me to speak, but his body language told me everything. I was unwelcome. I told him I had been looking for him, that I had spent years trying to reach out, trying to make things right. But I didn't know if he ever saw any of it. He didn't confirm or deny, just listened without reacting. I apologized properly, without excuses. Told him that I had no expectations, that I knew I didn't deserve forgiveness. But I needed him to know how much I regretted what I did. He let me talk, but there was no change in his expression. When he finally spoke, it was calm and direct. He said he didn't hate me anymore, but he also didn't care that he had moved on from that part of his life and I wasn't in it. I asked if he ever thought about what happened about me, and he shook his head, said it didn't matter to him anymore. I didn't know what else to say. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to fix. He had made peace with his life just without me in it before he walked away. I told him I was sorry. One last time, he didn't even turn around when he responded. Just said something that made it clear that no matter how much I regretted it, some things couldn't be undone. And then he went back inside, leaving me standing there alone. That was it, the last time I saw my brother. I don't know what I expected. Maybe not forgiveness, but at least something that felt like closure. But instead, there was just nothing people like to say. Time heals all wounds, that no matter how bad things get, eventually people forgive. But that's not true. Some betrayals don't get forgiven, some wounds don't heal, and some people don't come back. I lost my brother a long time ago. I just hadn't been ready to accept it. But now I don't have a choice, because I tried, and it still wasn't enough. Second story, AA for going in NC with my abusive mother and calling the cops on my addict stepdad after he broke into my house and attacked me. Now they're suing me for emotional damage. I 29F went no contact with my mother 54F a year ago after she pushed me past my breaking point. She's always been abusive, mentally, emotionally, and occasionally physically growing up. I was the scapegoat for everything wrong in her life. She'd constantly berate me, calling me names like stupid, selfish, or a waste of space. Nothing I did was ever good enough. If I got an AA, she'd ask why it wasn't an A. Plus, if I cried or showed emotion, she'd call me dramatic or slap me across the face to snap me out of it. When I was 14, she married Jack, 55 million, a jobless alcoholic who's been in and out of rehab for years. Jack immediately made it clear that I wasn't his problem. He'd spend most days drunk on the couch or screaming at me for disrespecting my mom. Whenever I tried to stand up for myself, he even threw a beer bottle at me once because I didn't bring him a drink fast enough. My mother defended him, of course, saying he was just stressed. That's always been her excuse for both of their behaviors for years. I put up with their nonsense because I thought I had no choice. But once I moved out at 21, I started to see how toxic they were, and with the support of my husband, 31M, I decided to cut them off completely. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the healthiest one I could make. I blocked their numbers, stopped visiting during holidays, and told extended family. I didn't want updates. That brings us to 3 weeks ago. I was home alone while my husband was at work, when there was a loud banging on the front door. I looked through the peephole and saw Jack. I have no idea how he got my address. I froze for a second, but before I could react, he kicked the door open and barged inside. Jack was clearly drunk, or high, or maybe both. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was slurring his words, screaming about how I was a selfish bee. For abandoning my mother, he said I was killing her, and that she cried every day because of me. I told him to leave, but he just laughed and shoved me so hard I hit the wall. I tried grabbing my phone, but he slapped it out of my hand and started yelling about how I was too good to help them. Now that I had money and a nice house, for context, my husband and I worked our Aries off to buy this house. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. Jack, meanwhile, hasn't held a job for longer than 6 months in his life. At some point, I managed to run out the back door and scream for help. My neighbor Tom, a retired Marine in his 60s, came over and got in Jack's face, yelling at him to leave before he called the cops. Jack staggered off, but not before shouting that I was dead to them. Tom stayed with me while I called the police, and Jack was arrested later that night for assault and trespassing. I thought that was the end of it, but last week I got served with legal papers. My mom and Jack are suing me for emotional damage, claiming my decision to go and see caused severe distress and embarrassment. The lawsuit is laughable. Basically, they're upset. They don't have access to me or my money anymore. My lawyer says we can fight it, but it's still going to cost time and money. We don't have to make things worse. My mom has been smearing me to the entire family. She's telling everyone that I'm mentally unstable and that Jack only came over to have a heart-to-heart, which is complete BS. A few relatives have taken their side, saying I should let bygones be bygones and stop destroying the family. One aunt even said, I'm being cruel for pressing charges against Jack, like I'm supposed to just let a drunk man shove me around in my own home. I'm trying to stay strong, but I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm being dragged back into the chaos. I worked so hard to escape. My husband keeps reminding me that I did nothing wrong, and that Jack and my mother are the ones at fault. But part of me feels guilty. Should I have handled this differently? Was pressing charges too much? Update. Thank you to everyone who supported me on my original post. I've been through hell these past few weeks, but your comments helped me stay grounded and focused on what I needed to do. A lot has happened since then, and I want to share everything, including the hard realities, the unexpected wins, and what I've learned along the way. After Jack's attack, the criminal case against him moved forward. It turns out that wasn't his first time facing the legal system. Jack has a history of charges including DUIs, public intoxication, and even a domestic disturbance case with an ex before he married my mother. His record worked against him when my lawyer presented it during his court hearing. The judge didn't buy his excuses, especially after Jack showed up drunk to the hearing, slurring about how he was defending his family. The judge sentenced him to 6 months in county jail, followed by mandatory rehab and anger management classes. Knowing he's behind bars brought me some relief, though I know Jack well enough to realize this isn't the end of his bullshit. The lawsuit my mother and Jack filed claiming I caused them emotional damage was finally dismissed. My lawyer tore apart their claims, presenting not only Jack's violent behavior, but also years of documented abuse from my mother. The judge didn't hesitate to throw their case out the court, even ordered them to pay my legal fees, which felt like a small victory. However, it's unlikely I'll see a cent from them anytime soon. My mom doesn't work, and Jack's disability checks barely cover their bills. My husband and I have had to shoulder the costs up front, which drained our savings and forced us to delay our plans to start a family. Winning the case didn't erase the financial strain, but at least I won't be stuck with the entire burden long term. The hardest part of all this has been learning why my mom and Jack targeted me now. After over a year of no contact, I reached out to my uncle, my mom's brother, for answers, and he told me the full story. Jack's drinking has gotten worse over the past year, and their financial situation is a disaster. Their house is in foreclosure, they've maxed out multiple credit cards, and they're being sued by a payday loan company. Jack's drinking cost him his most recent job, and my mom has been trying to cover up how bad things have gotten. That's why she suddenly resurfaced in my life. She wanted me to bail them out. It was never about reconciling or fixing our relationship. She saw me as a solution to her problems, someone she could guilt and manipulate into handing over money when I didn't cave. Jack escalated by showing up at my house thinking he could intimidate me into submission. Their lawsuit was nothing more than a desperate attempt to squeeze money out of me. And when that failed, they ramped up their smear campaign within the family. Speaking of family, the fallout has been ugly initially. A handful of relatives took my mom's side, believing her sob story about how I'm a selfish daughter who abandoned her. Some even accused me of overreacting by pressing charges against Jack. But as the truth came out, particularly Jack's criminal record and the details of their financial mess, those relatives started to change their tune. A few have apologized, admitting they were wrong to judge me, but others have doubled down in insisting I should forgive and forget. I've had to go no contact with several family members who refuse to respect my boundaries, and while it hurts, I don't regret it. The situation with my mom hasn't improved. She's losing her house, her social circle is shrinking, and she's desperately clinging to any shred of control she can find. She sent me emails from new accounts, which I block every time tried to spread lies about me to mutual acquaintances and even attempted to contact my husband's workplace. Thankfully, his HR department shut the down immediately. My lawyer is helping me enforce the restraining order. And any further, think I could make her wedding. She was so upset she cried and said she never thought I'd do that to her and skip her wedding. She's been telling other friends in the friend group that I'm coming to the wedding. When they've asked if that date is doable for me, we haven't spoken since my conversation about how upset with her I was a month ago. I'm not trying to be a bridezilla, and I know people are entitled to be private. My issue is that she should have extended that privacy with me, and not asked so many questions about my life knowing she was being so tight-lipped with hers. This is where I now need advice. I feel so bitter and like the whole friendship was a lie. I can't make it to her wedding, and honestly, having her at mine feels disingenuous. She has been telling friends she is still coming to mine. Is it rude for me to not go to her wedding? Should I go to her wedding since this is a decade? Friendship? Part of me wants to disinvite her and her husband to be from my wedding because of the lies. Is that rude? Is there a polite way to disinvite someone from your wedding without coming across like an absolute villain? Thank you for reading up to here. If you have TLDR best friend having a wedding day before mine, after keeping a relationship with a mutual friend hidden for a whole year. Edit, I'm Middle Eastern. So traditionally, we don't have BR's maids or a rehearsal dinner. Also, fix some wording plus added some more detail. Some of Op's comments commenter. When did this friend send out wedding invitations that you just found out about? And she's expecting you to attend sounds very last minute on her part, Op. So from what I've heard from the grapevine, she's only just found a venue and no invitations have gone out yet. She's been insisting that officially the engagement and knowing they were getting married in November, which is why nothing had been booked. It all just seems so wishy-washy to me, commenter. I just have to add a totally instant gut reaction to this situation. Your friend was siphoning off all of your wedding planning to make her easier. She deliberately planned the day before yours to cover that fact up. Hers is the earlier wedding, therefore you copied her in her mind anyway. I am very sorry you are going through this, but this is not a friend. Grieve the loss of what you thought you had, and move on with your life. No way should you bother to attend her wedding. She knows it isn't possible for you to go the day before your own wedding. She planned that. But I would formally revoke her invitation to your wedding. Best of luck to you. Hugs from an internet Nana Op. That's what I'm thinking too. Before all of this, she kept on saying how easy wedding planning seemed to be going for me. It's not been easy at all. I'm just good at hiding it, and I'm very organized at how I'd thought of things she would have never even known. We're a thing in terms of disinviting and the cultural impact. It's very split down the middle with opinions. So, I'm really torn. Thank you for the hugs, I really appreciate it. This has really helped me feel like I'm not being unreasonable or a bridezilla commenter. Quite simply. She is a terrible friend. Here's the gist of what you wrote. You guys are allegedly close, yet she didn't tell you about her year-long relationship. She's chosen to inconvenience you in your own wedding weekend, assuming you'd be available the day before your own wedding after she hid her relationship from you. She's lying to everyone about you attending her wedding. She hasn't shared any details about her own wedding, despite making you feel guilty about not including her in your own wedding planning. You never even really liked her husband if she thought you'd cut her off for dating this man. Why would she think you'd be okay? Not cutting her off for marrying him. She seems the kind of friend who wants to know all of your business without sharing anything from her own life. Honestly, not the kind of company you'd want to keep up heavy on the last point I have. So many friends who are private people and don't speak on many things until they're set in stone, but at the same time they follow. It don't ask, don't tell policy, so it doesn't bother me at all. And I completely agree about the worry of me cutting her off. I said this to her, and she really didn't have anything to say in response. I was over all of that stuff anyway. I invited him to the wedding because I've gotten over my dislike of him these last few years, but apparently she has selective memory and only wants to believe the things that suit her narrative. How would she know you got over your dislike of her fiancé, Ope? She should have known I moved past it because we all hang out as a group a few times a year, and her husband-to-be received an invite to my wedding. My issue is her getting upset with me for not being involved in my wedding planning, which comes across as hypocritical, but you're right, I've learned I should more tight-lipped about certain things now. I guess commenter. So she told your friends about the wedding weeks ago. She's been telling other friends in the friend group that I'm coming to the wedding when they've asked if that date is doable for me. How long did she invite them? No one mentioned it to you. It is unreasonable for anyone to expect you to attend a wedding the day before yours, especially with only a few weeks' notice op. She told me first and then the rest of the friends, and the days after, and so far everyone has only received verbal in invitations. Commenter. What kind of wedding is she planning? Is this like a courthouse wedding in the late morning, followed by a nice lunch or a full, uncatered event? The request is certainly presumptuous of her. So I'm just trying to understand all the details. She's planning on having her religious ceremony and reception on the same day, so it will have the same time frame as a Western and be typically an all-day thing. Especially if you consider pictures between the ceremony and the reception. Is this really happening? Did anyone confirm? Friends have confirmed with the groom the wedding is definitely happening. Is she pregnant? Definitely don't think she's pregnant. I know she's quite religious, but of course that doesn't really mean it's not a possibility. One last thought from Opie, trust me. There are so many holes that I'm curious about too in her story, and a lot else that I didn't put in myself in terms of how busy I'll be the day before Op's wedding. I'll be putting together my wedding favors with the girls in the family. In the days leading up to the wedding, we'll be doing airport runs up to the day before, as a lot of family will be traveling and some from 20 plus hours away, and we live close to 3 major airports, so it's all hands on deck. And then honestly, I was hoping I'd get a nice early night to relax for once, because I've had such a busy year. I'll be combining my henna event with the reception on the day of the wedding, because I've already had 2 events and have a Western-style bridal shower the weekend before. So I wanted to cut down on events. Update. 1.5 months later, a few people in the original post were asking about rehearsal dinners and all of that stuff. I'm Middle Eastern, and we don't really do that in our culture. Some people also said I needed to get over myself, and that I don't own the whole weekend, which is true, I don't. My issue was the lying and also the expectation of me to drive a total of 5 hours, 2.5 hours there and back the day before my wedding, and to attend another when I had so many things to finalize. I also just needed to vent being lied to. And having something that felt so calculated happen in what I thought was one of my closest friendships is strange. Oh. And I don't think it was a shotgun wedding, which a lot of people were suggesting anyway. I had my wedding, it was perfect, and I wouldn't change a thing. I didn't go to her wedding, I genuinely didn't have the time. I did see some posted videos of her wedding. She didn't copy mine, which a lot of people were worried about, considering she had been asking me about all of my prep. I'll give her her flowers, though. Her wedding was gorgeous, but definitely not a 2-month planned wedding. Like she was making out, it was to me in the end. She ended up coming to my wedding about 3 hours late. I was too busy being in my own newly married bubble to notice her or anything, but I did get feedback from people who were sat at her table. Like people said she would. In my original post, she spent the whole time talking about her wedding. In our culture, the bride receives a heavy piece of gold jewelry at her wedding. She made a show of having her new husband take her piece of jewelry out of her bag and putting it on her at the table. Just after my husband and I feel so nice saying that, did our outfit change? She was also showing off other pieces of jewelry she received, making a point to emphasize that she received real sapphires and real diamonds. She and her husband also spent the whole time texting each other, which means they were probably saying not very nice things that they didn't want our mutual friends overhearing, and she frequently would turn to him and say, "Don't worry, we're leaving soon." They were also packing on the PDA with neck kisses. She also then cried to my mom and brother about how she doesn't understand why I've not been talking to her and how been so cold to her. This wasn't true. I'd only told her how much her actions and lies had hurt me, and to be honest, she was the one who didn't respond to my last message. my mom being the classic mom she has brought her to me and tried to make us hug it out. We have this very awkward exchange caught on camera. My mom did tell my friend that she shouldn't have lied to me for a whole year, so it's nice to know she had my back, even if she pulled a typical mum move trying to make everyone happy. Our mutual friends are all on my side. No one really thinks she's in the right. Most of them didn't go to her wedding with the invites being so last minute, and her wedding being on a weekday. A lot of people couldn't get the time off for childcare. No one else knew about the wedding, which is crazy. I do believe that her truth is that she doesn't think she's done anything wrong, and she really does think that she considered me and my situation in her wedding planning. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those friendships where we no longer really align, and I have taken a step back and distanced myself from her. I do appreciate that she came to my wedding. However, I think she did it to make a point more than out of the goodness of her heart and respect for our friendship, considering what she pulled edited to add more information that some people were asking. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.